Today's video, we're going to show you a sample game. There's going to be another video of kind of a learn how to play later on, but for now, just to give you a flavor of how the game works. And what you're going to see is when we play, there's basically 6 basic attacks, which I'll replace my head and face here with a close-up of the 6 basic attacks. But what you think of it as rock, paper, scissors, if you had 6 choices instead of 3 choices. So the attacks, the first 3 attacks work like rock, paper, scissors. Each one is stronger against another one. The 4th attack, which is called defensive stance, the 4th attack is kind of a soft counter to all 3. The 5th attack is a hard counter to the 4th attack, the defensive stance. And then the 6th one is shove your opponent. That's the one where you can actually drive them towards the environmental hazard or drive them onto environmental hazard, which in most cases will kill them. So I'll give you a close-up of this sheet and we'll go through it real quick. When we play, we use the sheet, which describes everything and has your attack bonuses and or penalties and all modifiers. Or, if I hold it the right way, I also made a kind of like handy little grid that shows you how every attack interacts with every other attack. So you can use either one of these when you're playing until you get to know them, which doesn't take long, by the way, because there's not many of them, so it's pretty easy stuff. But it's good to keep these handy as a cheat sheet, or you can use this one. So you'll see that when we go to the game. And it won't be as exciting as a real game because I'll be narrating over it to explain what's going on. When we play for real, like every roll is like, ooh, you know, if you get a bad roll when you have the advantage, it's really frustrating. Just like in D&D or any other game when you get the edge and then you roll bad. So the dice come into it. But if you can read your opponent better than they can read you, or I guess just outguess them, whichever works, you do get a significant advantage, and it kind of minimizes the impact of the dice by giving yourself big modifiers to help you hit your opponent or shove them backwards. So I don't want to waste too much time talking. Let's quickly go through the attacks. I'll explain each one very briefly as we look at them. And then let's just jump right into a game. And again, I'll narrate and explain what's going on. And you'll see by watching this for just a couple minutes how easy it's going to be to learn and to play and how fast the gameplay will actually be. And also, hopefully it'll give you an idea of how much fun it is to kill your opponent or to get killed and get your revenge on the next round or whatever. You'll see how it feeds into. We normally never play one round in my house when we play. We always usually end up, whoever loses, like best 2 out of 3 or best 3 out of 5, because it's the kind of game that makes you get your juices flowing a little bit if you're competitive at all. So anyway, let's take a look at the 6 attacks and how they interact together, and then we'll just jump right into a game, okay? So there are 6 attack actions you can choose from each turn when you're planning your attack. Precise strike, mortal blow, attack stance, defensive stance, breaker, and shove or force a retreat. So let's look a lot closer at the first 3 because those 3 almost are rock, paper, scissors to each other. So precise strike gives you +2 additional modifier to your attack roll. If your opponent has chosen defensive stance, instead you subtract 2 from that attack roll. If your opponent has chosen mortal blow, and this is the hard counter to mortal blow, you add 4 to your attack roll. So it gives you a really big bonus and a good chance of taking, getting a hit in. Second one is mortal blow. Mortal blow, your warrior is trying to wind up for a huge strike. Because of that, you subtract 2 from your attack roll because it's harder to hit. But if you do hit, you add 3 to the damage roll, which is a lot. If the opponent has chosen defensive stance, which as I had mentioned is a soft counter to all of these, you instead of subtracting 2, you subtract 4 from your attack roll. But you still add the 3 damage if you are successful. But if your opponent has chosen attack stance, there's a hard counter to attack stance, instead of subtracting 2 from your attack roll, you don't subtract anything. You have no attack modifier penalty, and you still add your +3 damage. The third one is attack stance. In attack stance, you get +1 on your attack roll and +1 to your damage roll, so it's pretty useful. But if your opponent has chosen precise strike, you get to add 3 to your attack roll. And if the opponent has chosen defensive stance, which is, again, as I had said, is a soft counter to all of these, you instead subtract 1 from your attack roll instead of adding 1. And you subtract 1 from your damage roll instead of adding 1. So those are the first three. They kind of go in a circle, and as I'd said, they're all kind of soft countered by defensive stance. So let's take a look now at the next three. If you choose defensive stance, it doesn't give you bonuses or penalties against anything, but it basically counters every attack listed out here except for, and let's look at number 5, breaker. Breaker is what you use when you think your opponent is going to turtle, because defensive stance is a pretty decent stance in general. Breaker punishes your opponent and grants you a bonus of +3 to your attack roll if you've read correctly and guessed that they're going to use defensive stance or shove, which is number 6. Let's talk about shove. Shove, on a successful attack roll, this is the only attack when you hit, you do not get to roll for damage. If you have a successful attack roll, instead, you drive your opponent one space towards their backside and you follow them. So both figures move one space toward the other champion. So from your starting position, and let's actually look at a diagram of it. From your starting position, you would then move so that your opponent had his quote unquote or her back to the wall right against an environmental hazard in the arena. And that is diagram 2. That's a successful shove by the dwarf, puts the orc right up against the hazard. He doesn't take damage yet. But if on the next turn, or any subsequent turn from that position, the dwarf makes a successful shove and the orc does not make a successful shove, or just picks a different attack in general, and the dwarf is successful, the orc would be driven into the environmental hazard, and in this case would suffer 15 damage. A lot of champions, have 14 or less health, so they would die instantly. Some champions can survive one push into the environmental hazards if they're not wounded. So it's very powerful to shove your opponent in. The other thing to note is when your champion's back is against the wall, so to speak, you do get a +2 bonus on your shove attack roll. So, when you get, normally, if you play this game, you'll see, once you get your back to the wall, you almost have to pick shove to try to get out of there, to try to move back to the middle, because if you don't move out of there and your opponent's able to get a successful shove on you instead, it's not good for you. And then in picture 3 shown here, if from the middle position, the second picture where the orc has his back against the wall, let's say the dwarf fails his shove roll, but the orc is successful in his shove roll, they move just back to the middle of the arena, back to the starting spots. So shove is very easy. So those are the 6 attack actions you can choose, and you'll see as we jump into the game in a minute, it is represented by a 6-sided die. That 6-sided die, when you're choosing, is hidden from your opponent by the cover of your battle planner. So you will choose your attack action in secret, and you will be trying to guess what your opponent is doing. And then you will both reveal at the same time, and then you will resolve those actions. So depending what you pick and what your opponent picks, will tell you what modifiers to add or subtract from your attack roll and your damage roll. So let's take a look at it. So you can see the covers are on the battle planners. I've chosen the Samurai Girl. She's chosen Dwarf Lord. We move our figures to the middle. We choose our attacks in secret behind with the covers on the battle planner. She's chosen Defensive Stance, you can see. I've chosen Precise Strike. She has turned her special ability on. So when we reveal, since her special ability of the Dwarf Lord is an active ability, she gets to use it this turn. She gets to change her attack to counter mine. So she picks Attack Stance because it counters Precise Strike. We both roll to attack. She has a much bigger bonus than me. Luckily, I got a high roll and I hit, but she also hit. So since the attacks happen simultaneously, we can both roll for damage now. Now on the damage, you add from the card. Mine is D6 plus 1. And from Precise Strike, I get no other bonus. So she takes 3 damage. On hers, she has D6 plus 2. And she gets a bleed effect, by the way. Samurai Girl has a passive special, which puts a -3 bleed every turn after it's on there. Now, for hers, I took a lot of damage because she used Attack Stance. She got a +1 to damage. She has a +2 from her card that's already +3. So I took 6 damage. I'm sorry, 5 damage. We put our covers back on. Now we choose our actions in secret. Dwarf Lord's special action is now used, can't be used again. She flips that to off for the rest of the game. She also added the bleed token because the passive of Samurai Girl is to inflict a bleed upon a successful damaging attack. That bleed will now take effect at the end of every subsequent round. We reveal our actions. She has chosen Mortal Blow to try to finish me off, and I have chosen Attack Stance to try to make sure I get a hit and some damage in here. We both roll. She did not hit, and I did not hit. So she still takes the 3. She has that bleed effect. This is the first round it takes effect. So she still loses 3 health. She's now down to 8 health. That's the end of that turn. We put our covers back on. We begin to select in secret again. This time she is choosing Attack Stance. I don't know that, of course. So what did I choose? I can't even remember as I'm doing this. Narrating. I was thinking a lot trying to guess what she was doing, and I picked, what did I pick? I picked number 4. I went defensive stance to be safe. Because she has the bleed on her, I figured let me play it safe and just let her bleed out, the Dwarf Lord. So we both roll for our attacks. I was actually able to hit her, and she actually also hit me. I rolled a 3, plus 1 is 4. But she also takes 3 more because of the bleed. That bleed is really working now. So all in all, she took 7 damage. And she rolled a 1. And because she used Attack Stance, she gets another 1, and she has 2. So I took 4. So I am now, with Samurai Girl, very near death. 1 more hit, and she'll be able to finish me. But remember, she took 7, so she's also down to 1 health. So now we're both in jeopardy of dying from the next hit. So she is now down to 1. She will die next turn from the bleed no matter what. So she has to kill me. Otherwise, Samurai Girl will prevail. If she hits me and kills me, though, it'll just be a draw. This game does result in many draws, by the way, since actions are resolved simultaneously. She is choosing Precise Strike to try to get that big bonus to hit. And knowing that she just needs to hit me, I'm going defensive stance again. She probably should have guessed Breaker and gotten the bigger bonus against me, but she didn't outguess me, and I have defensive stance, so she has a pretty big penalty on her roll here. And I hit, and she did not hit. Unlucky dice on her part, and 4 damage plus that bleed, and the dwarf is dead. And that's how fast it can happen. Just a couple rounds and boom, we've got a winner. So this game, and it might not look as exciting without hearing the lie. I say stuff like, I know you're going defensive stance. You play head games. It's really fun. It's real exciting, really fast paced. We did it a little slower here, so it was trying to, kind of easier to follow along. So I'm really hoping once you guys see the video on how to learn how to play, you'll pick it up. You can learn how to play in just a couple minutes. You can be playing, and I promise you, if you play a few rounds, if you're winning, you'll want to keep winning. If you're losing, you'll want revenge. Believe me, if you're competitive at all, it starts to get in your head. And it's also fun to bet things like who's going to do chores. If you have friends over, who's going to pay for the pizza. You can just bet all little kind of stuff on it to make it, that much more interesting. When I play with my kids for chores, it gets really heated, believe me. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will start answering them. I'm convinced if you try the game, you will enjoy it. And for those of you who aren't interested in the game at all, rest assured there are more great minis coming and more free gifts coming. I am vowing to make this the most valuable Kickstarter for your dollar ever. So thanks for the support, everybody.